Will the 2022 offseason differ from the 2021 offseason for the Ravens? We talk about it next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Today's sponsor is Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code Touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. We return here. It is a midweek Wednesday edition, and that means it is our midweek mailbag here on the show. As we're in Super Bowl week, the Bengals and the Rams set to face off in a big Super Bowl, and unfortunately, we're not talking about the Ravens, but hopefully next year we'll be talking about the Ravens and in them in that game. So for now, we're answering offseason questions. The Ravens are in full offseason mode. They have made a lot of, I'll call them moves. You know, you have the coaching changes. We'll talk about some of where those coaches have ended up in this first segment, but I did get, kind of just the overall consensus from the mailbag questions this week. We do have technically 3 segments of mailbag questions, but I'm going to talk a bit about Don Martindale in the first segment. But it's almost a theme of, can the 2022 offseason be different for the Ravens than 2021? And just a lot of different factors in that. So throughout the whole episode, we're going to be talking about different aspects of the 2022 offseason as compared to the 2021 offseason, how this offseason can maybe differ from last offseason, and we'll have a bunch of questions with that. And then towards the end of the show, we'll answer the big picture question overall. But it's exciting. We have a lot of mailbag questions here today. Again, thank you for submitting your mailbag questions if you did. And if you want to submit your mailbag questions in future weeks, I put out a mailbag tweet every Monday evening. And if you want to just comment your questions or comments below there, I make sure to get to all of them, or at least as many as I can here on Wednesday and then throughout the rest of the week as well. So exciting stuff here to talk about today, as usual. So let's dive into it. Before we do that, though, if you're here with us on YouTube, you can see my face and my background. We're getting close. We're getting close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. If you've already subscribed to the channel, I greatly appreciate you. And if you are considering it, maybe you're like, I don't know if I want to, I highly recommend it. But if you're in audio form, you're listening in the car on the way to work, don't do YouTube in the car. No Locked On Ravens and driving. No Locked On Ravens and driving in video form. In audio form, do it. Locked On Ravens in audio form in the car. And if you're there with me here in audio form, thank you. I greatly appreciate you as well. Be sure to follow the show anywhere you get your podcasts. And whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, also be sure to follow me on Twitter at ChaosSharker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's now dive into this mailbag episode. But before we actually get into the questions, let's talk a bit about Don Martindale, as it was reported yesterday by multiple sources that Martindale will be taking the defensive coordinator job in New York with the New York Giants. He will be Brian Daboll's defensive coordinator there. And also a couple of the former Ravens assistant coaches that we've kind of seen the reports come out about this guy's not returning, that guy's not returning. Those guys might be following Martindale to the Big Apple in former inside linebackers coach Rob Ryan, and you have former outside linebackers coach Drew Wilkins, and that makes sense, right? I mean, it's not shocking to me that Martindale ended up getting a job as quickly as he did. I mean, look, whether the live by the blitz, die by the blitz was annoying at times or irritating at times, the adjustments in game could have been lacking. He did a lot with not a lot in 2021. He had some of the best defenses, in the NFL during his other years with the Ravens. So he is a good coordinator, a very bright defensive mind, someone who is very in his ways, but I think for a good reason. The Ravens just wanted to go in a different direction. And, I think it was needed. But for the Giants, they're getting a good one. And it makes sense that these coaches might be following him. I mean, Rob Ryan, it is well known that Martindale and Ryan are good friends. And Wilkins, Jess Rebeck pointed out that Wilkins has kind of been mentored by Martindale. So it makes sense that those two would go. So, best of luck to Don Martindale. And the Ravens will actually face off against the Giants in 2022 because of the new 17-game schedule thing where the Ravens play the same place finisher as the NFC conference they played 2 years ago. So the Ravens finished in 4th place in the AFC North this year. The Giants finished in 4th place in the NFC East this year, and the Ravens played the NFC East 2 years ago. So that's the conference the AFC North will be playing. The Ravens playing the 4th place team because they finished in 4th place, and that 4th place team is the Giants. Confusing. I know, kind of took my breath away talking about that. But yeah, so that's how that works out. Battle for the ages. I tweeted this out. No Lamar Jackson versus Daniel Jones battle for the ages. I'm talking Greg Roman versus Don Martindale. Let's talk about that battle for the ages. I mean, a lot of people joked about it, in the comments and everything about, it's going to be all the can't adjust to cover zero versus can't do anything but cover zero, like some of the crazy things there. But I think it'll be a good matchup, all things considered. So best of luck to Don Martindale. And hey, the Ravens will be seeing him in 2022. So that's I guess plus or minus depending on how you look at it. But let's dive into these mailbag questions now. I'm excited to look at these. And we'll start off with 2 questions here from Positive Vibes 0611. And first we'll start off with, what's with Lamar and his contract? Is he allowing EDC to get what he needs first? Then when he pays Lamar, the main pieces are already locked in. And so this is a good question. And I know the contract talk has been, it's been in full force recently. It's been something a lot of people want to know about. People are starting to get antsy. I mean, you can kind of sense, and not within the organization. I'm talking about within the fan base. I think the organization and Jackson are pretty calm about it. They understand that this is not just a, hey, let's sit down and work this all out in a day, right? It has taken a long, long time, and I think it might continue that way. Now, there's a definite chance that they can figure stuff out maybe before free agency starts. But in terms of Positive Vibes question here, I don't necessarily think that he is waiting for Eric DeCosta to get what he needs necessarily. There's a plan to an extent, I feel like, where, hey, look, the Ravens have Marlon Humphrey for $100 million. They have Ronnie Stanley for $100 million. They're able to figure out, who are we going to cut for cap savings? Who are the guys who we need to sign in the future that are not named Lamar Jackson, namely a decision on Marquise Brown. They have Mark Andrews now on I think a very good deal, honestly. And I mean, he proved that over the course of 2021, but the pieces are starting to fall into place. But for the Ravens, I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, well, we need to sign Marquise Brown before we can sign Lamar Jackson. I think when it happens, and that's kind of what they're working with here. And I mean, for right now, the 2022 offseason, in terms of how these negotiations work, it is more up against the clock. I mean, 2021, there wasn't necessarily like oh, wow, we have to get this done right now. And it's not that either in 2022, but it is more of, hey, look, this contract expires after this year, right? Lamar Jackson's playing on the 5th-year option this year. It's about $23 million of a cap hit. The Ravens seem comfortable taking that cap hit if it does come down to it. But, I also wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens say, hey, we can save some money with an extension right now this year. We need some of the money to re-sign some of our own guys. What can we do here? But they're not going to force anything, because I think really Lamar Jackson, I've said this, he will earn every penny of that deal. He has earned every penny of that deal. The Ravens, I think also they want to make sure that their franchise is set up for future success. This is not just hey, we're going to pay Lamar Jackson $700 billion and not be able to sign anybody else. It's a matter of being strategic with it. I'm not saying Lamar Jackson needs to take a hometown discount. He deserves every penny he makes. But I think for now, the Ravens feel a little bit confident. Maybe not confident, but they feel okay. I feel like, and the main pieces, who are they? It's Ronnie Stanley, it's Marlon Humphrey, it's Mark Andrews, and obviously Jackson, but the pieces around him I'm talking about. I mean, we'll see if the Ravens view Bradley Bozeman as that, but they have guys expiring, whether it's this year or in a couple of years. Obviously, Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, Marcus Peters, a couple other guys as well. You have the quote-unquote main pieces. I think if you want to talk about like hey, who's the Mount Rushmore of the 2022 Ravens right now, it's Stanley, Humphrey, it's Andrews, and it's Lamar Jackson. It's those core 4 guys. And then obviously, you make cases for Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and some of the other guys that they lost to injury. I mean, but for right now, I think the Ravens are feeling okay about it. Lamar Jackson's feeling okay about it. That's what I take away from the comments. So it's not necessarily, hey, we're waiting. They did that in 2021, I think, a little bit, where it's like, hey, we can wait this out a little bit. Lamar Jackson did the same thing. In 2022, they're a little bit more up against the wall to us, like, hey, we're going to have to use a franchise tag. We're going to have to do this, that, and the other. So a very interesting situation for sure. And then Positive Vibes asked, do we go after Honey Badger? What do you think the identity of the defense will be with or without him? So Honey Badger, Positive Vibes is referring to Tyrann Mathieu from the Kansas City Chiefs. And Tyrann Mathieu's a player I wanted. I wanted Tyrann Mathieu back in 2019, I think it was, right? 2019 when he was a free agent. I wanted him back then. And I thought he would have been a great addition. The Ravens decided to go with Earl Thomas instead. We all know how that ended. So Matthew's proven to be still a very, very high-quality player in this league, and he would help the Ravens immensely. Mathieu is someone who's very versatile, can play in the slot, is a ball hawk type safety. That's not what he's only good at, though. He's good at a lot of things, can come up, can tackle. He's a player that, Positive Vibes is asking what's the identity with or without. With, I think you're going to a little bit more of the, hey, we have a veteran who we can trust in the back end, which the Ravens just have not had since Earl Thomas. Deshaun Elliott's been learning the free safety position. He is not necessarily a versatile player where he can step up in the slot and play slot snaps, whereas Mathieu can do that if you want to. So I think you have more of a trust in your back end where you can bring guys up into the box more often instead of doing too high looks if you wanted to. Chuck Clark, I think, is better playing in that dime linebacker role. He really improved in 2021 in some coverage areas, which I was a little skeptical about coming into the year, but he improved it, and I'm very glad he did. But I think Mathieu, just with what he brings to the table from a versatility perspective, from a veteran presence perspective, an experience perspective, I think it's a very good signing for them if they do pull that off. And without him, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's definitely not the end of the world if the Ravens don't sign Tyrann Mathieu. He will be expensive. He's not going to come cheap at all. And without him, it's either Deshaun Elliott resigns on a one-year prove-it deal because of his injury history. They kind of run it back with that and have Brandon Stephens learn a little bit. Or it's, hey, we're handing the keys over to Brandon Stephens. The Ravens say, hey, Brandon Stephens, these are your keys now. We're handing these over to you. And that's what it is. So the Ravens have to make that decision because I think that it would serve them well to add a veteran to that defensive backfield. It is kind of young in the secondary, but Chuck Clark is becoming that veteran. Marcus Peters is a veteran. You have those types of guys. Jimmy Smith, depending on what happens there. But I think a veteran safety who is more of a ball hawking type player, can play single high stuff, really can help this defense out. But we'll head into our first break now. And when we get back, we'll be diving into more mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. BetOnline is who covered this season with more props, odds, and lies than ever before. As football continues to march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple weeks, BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcast, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline is up to the minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. It's our second segment of this midweek edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you, talking about mailbag questions. We got plenty of mailbag questions still to dive into with the theme of how can the 2022 offseason be different than the 2021 offseason. But we do have a three-peat of questions here by Eric Clark, friend of the show, of course. And Eric, who is, a pretty consistent mailbag contributor. So thank you, Eric. And again, thank you, everybody. But we'll talk about Eric's questions here. We'll call it the Eric Clark segment. We've done these before with Eric. But Eric's first question, what are your proposed fixes for the Pro Bowl? Well, when comparing 2022 and 2021 Pro Bowls, the backlash that the 2022 Pro Bowl got, it was a lot. And you kind of look at it as, if you want like an example of not necessarily far back in the day, but kind of like a more recent back in the day example, like the Sean Taylor hit, which everybody talks about, is just like, that's what I remember when I think, hey, what's my favorite Pro Bowl memory? I think of that Sean Taylor hit. You don't see that. You don't see guys putting their bodies on the line like that. And it's understandable, right? This is an exhibition game. It does not mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It's not like there's home field advantage on the line or something crazy on the line like that. So players, they don't want to necessarily risk their bodies anymore in that situation. But I think you can take ways from, like, let's talk about the NBA All-Star game, where it's not like kind of a not too far back in the day example of like, guys slapping the floor and like having fun with it and still going hard. Like they're still going hard. But now we see not as much defense in the NBA All-Star game. But the difference between the NBA and the NFL is obviously the NFL is much more of a contact sport where In the NBA, you're not tackling dudes. you're not, laying hit sticks or doing anything crazy like that. So any solutions? There have been a couple. I mean, I've seen stuff on Twitter that's like, hey, why don't you offer a conditional 7th round compensatory pick at the end of the draft to the winning conference? Or, why don't you make it so the rules are a little bit more flexible, this, that, and the other? I just think that they should make it so that it is not, first of all, two-hand touch, because let's face it, that's kind of what it was. But I think that they should make it, look, if you don't want to put your body on the line, and I'm not saying everybody has to go all out, but if you don't want to put your body on the line, that's awesome. You can still have like different types of things where they're like the Pro Bowl replacements, but I think it should be known within, not the rules, but known within the area of the game that it's like, hey, this is not going to be two-hand touch. We're going to tackle people, we're going to try hard. And if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to put your body on the line, then you can come, but, it might not be in your best interest to play. And I'm not saying that that's kind of forcing stuff. And I know that I don't want to do that. So it's very complicated in that way, but offering some type of increased compensation or doing something like that where, players want to play in it, like they want to go, they want to have fun, where, maybe there are 2 Pro Bowl games. I don't know. It's such a delicate thing, because you can't really do what the NBA is doing or what the MLB is doing, because the NFL is such a contact sport, and guys aren't going to lay out hit sticks anymore because, injuries are real in football. They can happen in these Pro Bowl games, and people don't want to risk that. And I understand why, but at the same time, there's just no entertainment factor, or at least not a ton of it anymore, as opposed to what it was back in the day. So the NFL has to figure it out. But yeah, maybe like 2 Pro Bowl games where like one of it is, hey, we're not going to try, and like we're going to have fun with it and just kind of chill out. And then the other one is, hey, we're not going to go 100%, but we're going to actually like do stuff and try and tackle people. And, I know that's kind of like, all right, well, then you're bringing 200,000 Pro Bowlers every year. But, I don't know. The NFL, I think, has to figure it out. They have some soul searching to do on that end of things. But sticking with the Pro Bowl a little bit, Eric asks, which competitions would you like to see the Ravens players in? And I'm assuming this is talking about the Pro Bowl. So I'm going to look to the Pro Bowl skills showdown and what they did, and talk about, kind of go down, read each one and list off players. So precision passing, excuse me. I mean, this is Lamar Jackson for me. I think Jackson has improved as a passer every single season, and I think that involves his accuracy. And I know a lot of people give him a lot on Twitter and on social media for his performance in some of those skills competitions when he was a Pro Bowler a couple of years ago. But yeah, I'd like to see Jackson in that. For Ravens players, I don't think Tyler Huntley's making the Pro Bowl anytime soon, as long as Lamar Jackson's the quarterback of the Ravens and Huntley's on the Ravens. So that's for Lamar Jackson for me. Thread the needle. This is a fun one. I'm gonna say Lamar Jackson again, but on the defensive side of the ball. So where the quarterbacks are trying, like who they're defending against or who they're trying to get the ball in on the defenders, I'm gonna say Lamar Jackson for the quarterback, and then for defensive backs, I mean, if we're talking strictly Ravens, I mean, for me, it's Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. That's fun, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit. And if I had it my way, how about Lamar Jackson going up against Jalen Ramsey and Marcus Peters? How would that be? Jalen Ramsey and Marcus Peters working in tandem together. Now, if you would watch the Ravens and Rams 2019 game, you know that there's a little bad blood between Jalen Ramsey and Marcus Peters. It was very unfortunate that Marcus Peters was not able to play in the Week 17 game against Los Angeles this year. But I don't know. I feel like it'd be fun to watch Lamar Jackson go up against Marcus Peters and Jalen Ramsey and kind of them working together in tandem. It's just like a funny idea to me. But, you can talk about other star defensive backs like Jair Alexander, Stephon Gilmore, some of these other really good. I mean, Tre'Davious White, who tore his ACL. There are and I know I'm not listing everybody out here, but there are very, very quality defensive backs in this league. And it'd be fun. Like maybe Jesse Bates, right? Like AFC North, like Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jesse Bates, if you want to do like safeties or like AFC North safeties. So yeah, that's where I'm going with that competition. Best catch. This is Mark Andrews for me still. Marquise Brown makes some crazy catches though. Like Marquise Brown makes insane catches. There was one against Cleveland where he just like reaches out his hand, just snags it, brings it in, and goes. And I'm like, all right, that's awesome. Like, that's sick. So Marquise Brown's another more. Rashad Bateman too. I mean, Bateman has sticky hands. Really, really, I think good bet for me to improve his catching skills over this offseason. So, hey, Rashad Bateman makes the 2023 Pro Bowl. Hey, best catch competition. I think Rashad Bateman would be cool as well. Fastest man, this is Marquise Brown for me 100%. I'd love to see Marquise Brown versus Tyreek Hill. I think that'd be really fun to watch. Those two are blazing fast. Those two, I'd be really interested to see how that turns out. I mean, both are amazing. And in terms of their speed, and for the epic Pro Bowl dodgeball, I mean, let's just go Ravens offense versus Ravens defense. If we're doing teams of 5, Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews. I mean, if you want to get some big guys in there, maybe like a Ronnie Stanley or maybe Ben Cleveland. Like, can he dodge the dodgeballs with how big he is? Like, that'd be something cool. It's just how muscular he is. So that'd be fun. Then on defense, maybe like Calais Campbell. I know it's not up in his status is still up in the air, but like I think Calais Campbell, Patrick Queen, I think is another one. Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, and Odafe Owe. I'll say those 5 for me. Maybe you could throw in like a Deshaun Elliott if he comes back, or a Brandon Williams if he comes back. Maybe just Metabike, some of those guys. But yeah, I think the dodgeball thing, if you're just going Ravens versus Ravens, offense versus defense will be cool. And then maybe like each team gets a special teamer. So like Justin Tucker goes with offense and Sam Cook goes with defense or something like that'd be cool. So that's a little fun question there from Eric. And then finally, Eric asks, which prospect is your pick at 14 this week? I know, I'm sorry. I wanted to do the mock draft Monday this week, but there was so much Ravens news. I was like, I can't not talk about the Ravens news. So we postponed the mock draft Monday to next, or at least the start of the mock draft Mondays to next week. And mock draft Mondays, they are consistent. They're every Monday, unless there is big Ravens news. Then we just kind of, we'll do a mock draft Tuesday or something, but we do a mock draft every single week. And how that works is I put out a mock draft Sunday on my Twitter and I retweet that. I know I put it on the Locked On Ravens account. I put it on my Twitter. And if you have a mock draft, you can put your mock draft below it, and I will get to it on the show and talk about your mock draft. So that I think is going to start next week, next Monday. If it doesn't, it's because there's Ravens news. We'll talk about the Super Bowl a little bit, but yeah, I think I'm going to do my first mock draft Sunday next week. We'll see though. We'll see how it ends up happening. But for me, my pick at 14 this week, I've talked about David Ojabo a lot. I know my dream pick is Ike Ekwonu out of NC State, but Trevor Penning's been getting a lot of talk here. Let's talk about Trevor Penning a little bit. Trevor Penning is someone who is extremely strong, someone who can come in and I think protect Lamar Jackson with a nasty streak. Spencer came on here a bit yesterday and talked about how the Ravens don't what's their identity on the offensive line? They don't really have one right now. They're not like nasty finishers. They're not all finesse guys. They're not all power guys. They're not all great run blockers, not all great pass blockers. And you're not going to have like a group that's consistent. Like, oh, every single thing is the same out of all of them. But an identity is a little different than that. It's, an established thing that people look at this Ravens offensive line and they say, oh, wow, like they're really good, or they're really nasty, or they're this, or they're that. So Trevor Penning has a lot of strength, just overall strength, but there's a little technique he can work on. At 14, I think that Penning would be a trade back candidate for me, but I think if he is there at 14 and he is a guy that the Ravens have fallen in love with, I don't hate the pick. I don't hate it, but there are other options there to consider. I mean, there are going to be tackles later in the first round, like David Falele, who, Spencer talked about yesterday. There are a couple others, like if you want to go into the second, third, fourth round, like Abraham Lucas is another one. So it depends where the Ravens want to go here. I think they should invest in a tackle early. If that is Penning, I think that's a fine pick for them, but there's still a lot of time to go in this draft process. Penning is, he's a monster in multiple different ways, but again, some technique stuff he has to finish. He has to kind of work on, but yeah, I would say my guy for this week is Trevor Penning, just because I've seen all the videos of him at the Senior Bowl. And, everybody's like, oh, this guy protecting Lamar Jackson. Like, let's do it. And like, yeah, let's do it. But I also, want people to understand that there are still some things he has to clean up on. He's not going to come in and, be this perfect prospect. He could be this amazing guy day one for sure, but, there are some things he has to clean up on. But strength, nastiness, mean streak, Trevor Penning and Ryan Jensen, what a duo that would be. We'll head into our final break now, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into our final batch of mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. This time of year, New Year's resolutions can be getting kind of iffy for people, but don't do that this year. Stick to your resolutions, and if that is to eat right, do it with Built Bar. And if you have not tried the Puffs, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. The Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy and marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat and covered in 100% real chocolate, but all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, the Puffs included. They're low-calorie, high-protein. Replace your candy bars with these. I mean, they're just better. Most Built Bars do contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, and there are so many flavors to choose from. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Hey, Ravens fans, this is Kevin Ostreicher with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about and get upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code touchdown for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill-up cash back. Don't pay full price of the pump anymore and get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code touchdown for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back is added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. That's code touchdown. We're back here. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens here on Wednesday. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. And let's continue with these mailbag questions and kind of get into the big picture here with a question from Stacy. Will the 2022 offseason training regimen differ from the 2021 season? And so this is an important question that Stacy asked here, and I'm going to expand on it a little bit. Talk about obviously the training regimen, but also just the offseason in general and how it can be a little different. So starting with the training, I'd be shocked if the Ravens don't make changes. I mean, for what they have gone through just in 2021 by itself, what they went through in 2021 injury-wise should never, ever happen. I understand football is a sport that is extremely taxing on the body. Car wrecks after every game. The injuries can happen quite literally anywhere in the game of football. Practice, training camp, preseason, regular season, postseason. It happens. It happens all the time. And very rarely, if ever, do you see a player say, hey, I'm feeling great after a football season, right? I need time to recover. I need this, and rightfully so. But the amount of injuries the Ravens suffered in 2021 was just so crippling. And it's not just the 2021 thing. That's the issue. The Ravens have seen these injuries happen for years. Whereas, you can talk about the 2019 season and say, they only really had 2 major injuries up until week 16. It was Pernell McPhee and it was Tavon Young. Then you have Mark Ingram down and Mark Andrews has a thing. But other than that, 2019 was relatively healthy. And what happens there? The Ravens go 14-2. Health is a key factor in winning a championship. Cincinnati, let's talk about them. 2021, they were a very healthy team. Not perfectly healthy, but they were very healthy. Los Angeles, same thing. Lost some key guys, but they were very healthy, all things considered. So I think for what the Ravens have dealt with, you can talk about the 2015 season. You can talk about 2014 when they were signing corners off the street to play against Tom Brady in the divisional round. You can talk about even 2020 when they lost guys like Ronnie Stanley and Nick Boyle to those gruesome injuries. Stuff I think does have to change, and I think the Ravens know it. John Harbaugh talked about it where he's having these meetings. I don't think he's making that up. Maybe he did, but I highly, highly doubt it. Harbaugh, I think, is much, much above that. So I think that John Harbaugh is absolutely telling the truth, where they're looking at everything. They're exhausting every option. They're trying to figure it out. And how that kind of relates to what the Ravens are going to do this offseason as opposed to maybe 2021 is I think they're going to overcompensate. The Ravens did not do that in 2021 during the offseason. They laid low a bit, right? They didn't really sign people in free agency. They signed Kevin Zeitler and Sammy Watkins and Justin Houston and Alejandro Villanueva, but it wasn't like they were going after depth pieces really hard, right? They were going after guys to fill out their roster, which is what they should have done, but tackle depth was an issue. They really only had 8 draft picks, and 2 of them didn't even make the team outright, so that's a problem. And they banked on some health. It didn't work out, unfortunately, and now they understand that they have to, I think, overcompensate a bit more. And so how that relates back to injuries is they understand now. They've gone through that. They saw what happened in 2021, and they're like, oh, we do not want to go through that again. So I think what we're going to see compared to 2021 is a little bit more of like the minorish signings, like maybe veteran signings that, guys who are maybe on their last contract, a 1-year deal. You could maybe a couple other free agent additions, more re-signings, more draft picks. I think they're going to end with more draft picks than they did last year. But there are a lot of things that the Ravens can clean up on, and part of that is what's the preseason looking like? A lot of people have controversy on the preseason and just what the regimen for that should be. How often should the Ravens players be playing in the preseason? And if you have any opinions on that, you can comment that down below. But for me, it's been consistent. I've been consistent with it. Before the 4th preseason game was axed, I had it, usually what it was is the starters play for like a quarter in the first game, maybe a quarter and a half in the second game, about a half in the third game, then they don't play at all in the 4th game. And so what I said for the 3 preseason game format is, hey, have the starters play a quarter in the first game, a half in the second game, and sit them in the 3rd game. And that's what it should be. And I said it all week long leading up to that Washington game, where I said the Ravens should sit their starters. I wouldn't be surprised if they play, but I would sit them. And this was not me reacting to J.K. Dobbins. It was me saying it throughout the week before it. And lo and behold, the Dobbins injury happens. It's unfortunate. I'm not blaming anybody for it. Injuries happen. But, I think that's what it should be. A quarter in the first game, a half in the second game, sit them all together in the 3rd game, get out of there as healthy as you can. So that's where I am, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens end up just saying, yeah, we're not doing that, and resting them for the entirety of the preseason. So we'll see what ends up happening, but the offseason regimen, I think, will be different for sure in terms of training, and I think we'll see it even as soon as a couple months from now, just how the Ravens operate, what they're doing. And we'll talk about it more, of course, as the offseason goes along. But our next question here comes from J. Cole is a rap god. Yeah, J. Cole is very good. But he asks, who could be some candidates for the few vacant coaching positions we have left to fill, preferably tight ends coach? So, yeah, there are a couple left here. Tight ends coach. There are a few options that I have either seen on Twitter or who I think would be good options. John Embry is one. John Embry worked with the 49ers. He was not brought back by that team. Embry worked with George Kittle, really helped his career out, and was a key part in developing him. So I think Embry would be great. I also saw Jeff Rebeck mention Richard Angolo, who is an assistant for the Ravens. He's an assistant offensive line coach, but he actually was a tight end in the NFL. He was drafted by the St. Louis Rams in the 7th round of 2003, played ball at Western New Mexico, 41 years old. He could be another option, just an internal candidate. So if you're looking at one internal candidate, one external candidate, external, I think John Embry would be great. Internally, maybe it would be Richard Angolo. And yeah, other than that, they do have the outside linebacker vacancy that Drew Wilkins, obviously he's not returning. Ryan Osborne is, I think, where a lot of people lean there and what Michigan media has been reporting. Osborne has been credited with working with guys like Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo to kind of push them forward. And Mike McDonald, obviously, I think wants to bring in a couple of his guys. So I think that would not be shocking if that is actually true. Our final question here comes from Benji. And Benji asks, with the down season Marlon Humphrey had and Mike McDonald and Coach Harbaugh tweaking the defensive staff, could you see them hiring a new defensive backs coach? I don't think so. Denton Lynn has been good for them. It seems like over the first year. Chris Hewitt, if you want to go there as well, if you want to talk about those two in a vacuum, Chris Hewitt and Denton Lynn, I think both guys are probably safe, in my opinion. The secondary, I think it's just too hard to judge. I mean, I really do. It's what I talked about with Greg Roman in terms of just like how can you accurately judge him for a season where he didn't have his entire run game and had a backup quarterback for about a third of the year. It's tough. There are clear flaws with Roman, obviously, but there's also like, all right, he didn't have like an offense for the last 6 games of the year, and the offense looked decent over the first couple weeks of the pass offense at least. So, that's understandable why they decided, it seems like, to give him another chance. And again, I will say it, that if Roman struggles with a fully healthy offense in 2022 to start the year, he is the most likely scapegoat option. That's just what I believe. But Danson Lynn and Chris Hewitt, in terms of like defensive back coaches, secondary coaches, no Marcus Peters. They lose Deshaun Elliott. They lose Marlon Humphrey. They're down like Anthony Averett some weeks. They're cycling through like Robert Jackson and Daryl Worley, and then they did the best they could. It was tough though because the pass defense was not good at all. Like there's no sugarcoating it. It was not good, and it's another situation where, all right, if the secondary can't really get it together with Humphrey back healthy and Peters back healthy and maybe a first-round corner or Tyrann Mathieu or Deshaun Elliott back or whoever it is, then maybe you see some changes next offseason. But for now, the Ravens are going to go through some turnover, and we've seen that, but I don't think the turnover is going to kind of trickle into the secondary. I think it's more of a, hey, we lost our entire secondary. We're going to give you another shot. And that's where I think the Ravens are thinking right there. But that's all that I have for you here today on Locked on Ravens. Another great week of mailbag questions. We'll make it back here tomorrow. We'll be diving into more Ravens talk, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you tomorrow.